everyone, welcome back to the Nello Reads channel. Our first malicious compliance story of the day comes from Ancient Educator. You have to eat it on your break for it to be free? Fine by me. Fish in my mouth as we speak. I never take a break, save for a number one visit to the bathroom. Nearly everyone else in my fast food establishment takes 20 minutes plus in smoke breaks or sit-down breaks to eat their meals. I have a wife and 3 kids at home who love eating food I bring home, so I skip my break and take the food home at closing, along with the occasional food that's gonna be tossed away. I got into the system of making sandwiches for myself ahead of time and heat lamp them so I can just leave without making a mess. All of a sudden, one of my managers gets happy and says, "You know, I'm gonna have to start charging you for all this." I thought he was kidding. Either way, just in case, I said, "Well, I never take a break. You know that. So when else am I gonna eat it?" The next evening, he rung up the items for me to pay for at the end of the night. I paid and decided I'd begin my malicious compliance now. I decide to start taking my 20-minute break, eating my food for free. Now we're slammed. I still saved some for my kids. I could get used to this. Oh, and the malice came in the form of knowing that my mid-shift break is crunch time. That's why I never took those breaks. Way too busy. Explanation regarding people who cry about this in the comments. So it's malicious that you take the break you're entitled to at the time you're supposed to? That's pretty hardcore. Let's talk about malice, shall we? Malice isn't in the aftermath, or the extent of the results of what happened. It's about the intent. Doing something with malice is doing something, even if that something is what I'm entitled to, with ill intent. Knowing that my actions, as federally entitled to them as I am, are going to put a damper on things to say the least, and in this case totally screw the drive-thru, makes this malice. This is why I hate doing this. These are my friends, my comrades, my homies. I know it was going to mess up our day part numbers because my manager counts on my skills during the rush. All this considered, I'm malicious as a mother effer. I mean, I don't really see anything wrong with what OP is doing. He gets free food as part of his job benefits, so why should it matter when he eats it, right? Especially if he's helping the company out. Our next story comes from an anonymous poster. Manager snapped at me to just stop talking, so I complied. I worked at a very popular fast food restaurant that shall remain unnamed. I was young, it was my first job, but I ran circles around some of my coworkers because the owner did not know how to hire people. There was a transfer from another store, a manager who was sent to, quote, fix our times. This was annoying enough, but I'm pretty sure he was sexist as hell. In order to get a raise, I had to learn how the kitchen works, so the owner told me I could work there till it got busy. I switched with a kitchen worker because he wanted to learn how to be a cashier. The manager spent the entire time I was in the kitchen making comments, trying to get me to leave, saying I shouldn't be there. Next thing I know, it got really busy really quickly, and I was told to handle both drive-thru and front screens and make all the food. I noped out of there and told the other guy to switch back with me. We stopped taking orders, I handled the front and drive-thru, and the kitchen got everything working. Cue the manager showing up and taking more orders. Now, I know I shouldn't have, but I asked him if he thought he should be up here making the problem worse instead of fixing it in the kitchen. His only response was it was my fault for not switching back sooner. I said, I get that, but right now, you should be back there. And he sat and argued with me in front of all the customers over it being my fault. I was still working while he was standing there. So as I went to give someone their food out the window, he said, "OP, just stop talking." Okay. I didn't take another order on that headset until my other cashier left, 1 hour before closing. I didn't say a word to that manager for days. I completely stopped talking that night and refused to acknowledge him. And I unwrapped all the coins in the register, so he had to count them by hand at the end of the night. I'm actually pretty curious what the manager thinks of all this. OP never really said. Because if he had the authority to do so, I would not be shocked if OP got fired for all this. Not saying the manager is in the right, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what he did. The third story comes from Murphy's Mom 08. Don't leave the locker room? You got it, boss. Several years ago, I was a high school PE teacher. The district I worked in was Title I, with a huge population of English language learners and low-income kids, 95% or so. For hygiene reasons, we required the kids to wear PE uniforms and change for PE. Kids also showered after class. Because of our students' socioeconomic standards, I always had spare clothes and towels the kids could use and offered to wash PE clothes weekly for students who didn't have access to laundry facilities. This practice was also done by the male PE teacher and has actually been around since before I started. Before I get to the malicious compliance, there are a few more details you need to set the scene. Classroom management in teaching is a whole art in and of itself. PE is kind of next level, because you have 30 plus kids all running around and a lot of area to cover. In addition, the genius who designed our school decided to not have the locker rooms connected to the gym, but rather put a hallway in between. This was somewhat of a management nightmare, because there were basically 3 places you had to supervise, and there wasn't a way to watch all 3 at once. On top of that, locker rooms had to be locked between classes. The laundry facility was also located in the hallway between the gym and locker rooms. Two-way radios were also frequently used by all PE teachers in the district, as well as admin, counselors, etc., for safety and to find kids when outside, before school, after school, etc. Finally, because our district was a decent size, but rural, it was a stepping stone for a lot of want-to-be administrators. They would come in for a year or two and then leave. This revolving door of admin also made it a bit frustrating, because rules and climate changed every few years while people tried to leave their mark to get hired for the next gig. Now on to the malicious compliance. As I mentioned, it was always a little crazy trying to supervise kids everywhere. But for the most part, the kids were really good and respectful, and we had a pretty good system. I would often duck out of the locker room between classes to start laundry, let kids into the locker room during a class period, or open it up for sports teams leaving early at the end of the day. These sort of frequent interruptions happened more often than you would think, but we made it work. That is, until we got Attila the Hun as principal. This particular chick thought her crap didn't stink, and came in with the idea that everything in the school sucked and it was her job to fix it. She was also an alcoholic that had learned to work the system and stepped on everyone she could, trying to get to the top. Well, one day, she wandered past PE while sneaking into the building late to work and decided this was her time to make a point. I had left to go put laundry in the dryer, and she proceeded to chew my butt out for leaving the locker room unsupervised. Keep in mind, this was during a passing period, where other teachers are allowed to step out of their room to go to the bathroom, make copies, etc. This applied to everyone except myself and the male teacher in PE. I should add I was the union rep, and she hated me for it because the union held her accountable. I was told under no circumstances was I allowed to leave the locker room during the day unless it was to go to class, and that no students were allowed anywhere without supervision. Okay, boss, you got it. I also need to mention that everyone else in the district knew how much she sucked, and most other building admin and teachers had also had run-ins with her. I was also pretty well respected, having been in the district a while and worked in several other buildings, and had been in teacher leadership positions. The day she told me that, I put my plan into place, and made sure I always had my two-way radio with me. I laid low for a week or two, and then put my plan into action. First, I needed to put laundry in the dryer, so I radioed HS Girls, PE to Attila the Hun over the entire district radio. She responded thinking it was urgent, to which I stated, I need to go put clothes into the dryer and need coverage in the locker room. She tried to tell me that I didn't need to radio for this, to which I reminded her that she insisted we never left the locker room unless it was to start class. About 15 minutes later, she strolls down rather pissed off to let me go do my mundane task. I am instantly flooded with text messages from other admin, teachers, etc. who have access to radios and heard it go out, laughing. A few days later, she sent a kid down to change because they had gang-affiliated clothing on. Kid comes to me while I'm teaching, asking to open the locker room. You guessed it, I got on the radio and asked her to come down and unlock the door and wait, reminding her that kids are not to be unsupervised. This goes on for about a week, with about 4 to 5 radio calls a day. Anytime students, sports teams, or anyone else needed to get into the locker room or I had tasks to do, it went out over the radio for all to hear, reminding her each time of her rules. She finally caught on to what I was doing, and then started ignoring me on the radio. At that point, I would radio to all other admin in the school/district, or anyone else that could come and assist, since it appeared our admin was unavailable. Also, not a good look for her. I think this malicious compliance was one of the last straws for Attila, because shortly thereafter, she was fired. I think the superintendent got word of all her shadiness, but me constantly on the radio didn't help. He ended up coming to me and the male teacher, letting us know we could go back to actually doing our jobs and we wouldn't be punished. As an update, she was subsequently fired from other admin jobs in our state every year for about 3 years until COVID hit. I have zero regrets. I feel like the school system kind of attracts a lot of people who are power hungry, but don't necessarily know how to use power when they actually get it. I'm not saying that's the case with everyone, there's some awesome teachers out there, but I remember a lot of teachers and deans who remind me a lot of Attila. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and I will see you in the next video.